Greetings, students, and welcome again to this episode of The Professor Travel. I am your host, The Professor Travel, coming to you from Orange County, California. This is the website, the vlog, and the podcast that you come to in order to learn more about different travel destinations. It's where you go in order to discuss different destinations as a community. We hope that this inspires you to travel more, and hopefully you're going to enjoy life more through the cultural enrichment and multiculturalism that you get as part of this process. Now, you can reach me through a variety of different methods. First and foremost, of course, you can reach me through my website at theprofessortravel.com, or on YouTube or Facebook, you can find me at The Professor Travel. I'm just new on TikTok, so please feel free to go and see some of my videos there at The Professor Travel. You can also find me on Instagram at the_professor_travel. On Twitter, I can be reached at theprofessortr1. And then finally, if you're a blogger, you can find me on Blogspot at theprofessortravel.blogspot.com. Today, I have a recurring visitor with me, my visiting professor, Dr. Chad Swaney. Please say hello to everybody, Chad.
Hey, everybody. This is Chad.
Welcome again. I really appreciate you taking some time to go over your travels with us. And this one is a real passion for me because I'm looking to go here later on this year. This is on a recent trip you had taken to India. Is that correct?
I did indeed. I went to Delhi, India.
Awesome. Great. Now, before we get started, can you maybe share a little bit about this wonderful picture that we have of you on the screen right now?
Yeah, absolutely. This is from my trip to India, and this is inside of the Red Fort in Delhi, which is the kind of old fortification where the Mughal emperors held their court. And it's actually massive. There's a large fort structure, but then inside of it is practically a city. And this particular photo I took in front of one of the rooms of the palace. And there are like dozens of rooms like this. This was one of the day rooms. And according to one of the plaques, they kept tigers and elephants underneath for entertainment. So I thought that was interesting. I thought I'd take a selfie.
Yeah, it's a great selfie, and the intricacies of the architecture there are just spectacular, the way that they do that.
Yeah, the design, just the level of detail throughout the whole, actually, you can see in each different building too, inside of the fort has a slightly different style to it, which is really cool. But this, I think this probably had the most intricate style, intricate design work.
It's amazing. Now, for my students and viewers who have not had an opportunity to see your previous video, would you mind sharing a little bit of your background with us, maybe a little bit of your educational background and some places that you've recently traveled?
Sure thing. Yeah, so by profession, I am a learning professional. So I've worked in instructional design and adult learning for about 20 years. As you pointed out, I did just finish my doctorate in the subject last year. And so primarily my work has been in the corporate world. So leading teams that do training, that build support content for large organizations. So I've worked at Amazon. I currently work at Zillow Group, and that's kind of what I do in my background. And then in terms of travel, I kind of got the travel bug about 2.5 years ago, where I had actually only been outside the country once before until 2.5 years ago. And then in the last 2.5 years, I just took count, I visited 19 countries.
Oh my God.
And this last 6 months, for some reason, I've really been visiting South Asia a lot. So I've been to India a couple of times, Sri Lanka, and Maldives, which we talked about on my last trip. So this has been like the 6 months of South Asia, but I love traveling. And for me, I think one of the things, for me, I love airplanes. So for me, being on the airplane is one of my favorite parts of the trip because I love trying different aircraft, trying different airlines, and experiencing different things in the air.
And we're going to definitely talk about that because I love how you take the time to intricately review the airplanes, the aircraft, the service, everything about the airplanes, especially when you're traveling that distance from the United States all the way over to Asia. And because of the time involved in that travel process, you do want to be comfortable, and you want to be comfortable with who you're traveling with.
Yep.
So I think part of that is going to be really integral to this part of this conversation. So I appreciate that. So, and by the way, 19 countries in a couple of years, that's amazing. I think you're more than making up for your time of having not traveled previously. I think that's fantastic. So tell me, for this specific journey, we went to India. Tell me, why did you decide to go to India on this specific?
Yes. It's a very unromantic reason. It is because it got to be about the end of September, and I have Gold 75K status on Alaska Airlines, which is our hometown airline here in Seattle. And I realized that I did not have enough future travel plan to re-hit the miles required for that status to renew. And so I started to think through, I basically went through the mileage chart, because in Alaska's program, which is still a traditional program, you receive miles based on the actual miles flown, but then you also receive multipliers for different classes of service. So what I essentially did is I went through the Alaska Airlines award chart, because they also have a lot of partners. So if you fly in a partner airline, you earn miles with Alaska. And I essentially went through and figured out which airline in which class had the highest multipliers, then went thinking about, well, I would like to travel when I already will have some time off of work. I essentially did the math to figure out where I could travel that would allow me to earn the most miles for the least amount of money at a convenient time. So what that resulted in is me booking a trip in first class on British Airways, which is a 4x multiplier. So I earned 4 times the actual miles flown, to fly first class from Seattle to New Delhi and back over the course of a weekend. So that got me the miles that I needed and was relatively inexpensive, and gave me a chance to try. I'd never flown first class in British Airways, so gave me a chance to try out a new product and then do a little traveling.
I want to talk about British Airways in just a second, but that sounds like an amazing whirlwind for just doing it over a weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, because how long was the actual flight itself to get to New Delhi?
Yep. So so it goes through London. So it's about an 8-hour flight to London, and then about an 8-hour flight to Delhi. So London's kind of halfway in between in terms of flight hours. So on the way over, I think I had like a few hours at the airport, and then on the way back, I think I had like 12 hours in London.
Okay, makes sense. Now, as part of this trip, I do want to ask, because I know that a visa is required over in India. I wanted to find out a little bit how you went through that process.
Yes, so India has an e-visa program. So what that means is there's a website that you go to, and just be sure that you're on the official Government of India website, because there are lots of people who pay for Google results if you search India e-visa. So go past the sponsored ads and make sure it's like the gov.in website. But essentially what you do is you fill out a form. It asks kind of the normal questions you would expect on a visa application. Interestingly, especially given recent events in India's politics, it asks for your religion. But anyway, you fill this form out. You have to take a current photo of yourself. You can totally just take a selfie that meets the requirements. And then you submit that online with a small fee. I think it's like $5 or $10. It works out to like $5 or $10. And then within 24 to 48 hours, you get an email back with a document that you must print out, which is an approval, and it's an e-visa approval, and it has your photo and it has like a barcode on it. But definitely print that out and take a physical copy with you. One thing about India, just in general, they love paper everything. So make sure to print out a copy of your e-visa before you go. And so, you have, I believe, a total of 30 days from when you apply for it for your first entry. So there's no real reason to wait.
So what were the total costs then associated with this?
It was like $5 or $10, not very much.
That is not a lot at all.
Yeah.
And it was pretty fast?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And does that, you said that cover, now how long will that cover you for?
It works for 6 months and up to 3 entries.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because I'm going to have a situation coming up at the end of this year where I'm going to be flying into New Delhi,
Yep.
probably doing, like Delhi, Jaipur, and Agra, then flying from there over to Dubai and jumping on a cruise ship. And from there, I'm going to be going down through Abu Dhabi, Muscat, Oman, and then hitting the west coast of India, where I'm going to Goa, New Mangalore, Mumbai, and Cochin on that side. So I'm wondering if maybe the ship just being part of that cruise automatically gets you like a limited visa, like a 72-hour visa kind of thing where you're able to get in there. I'll have to do more research on that, unless you know.
Yeah, I don't know 100% for sure, but because sometimes there are special visa rules for cruise ships. Mm-hmm. But if you have, either way, if you have the e-visa, you'll be covered for at least your second entry. Yeah. And then sometimes it depends on a lot of it just depends on sort of honestly their opinion, whether you get 2 or 3 entries, but you'll definitely get 2 entries.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So that brings up another topic I want to discuss really quick. In preparing for India, there's a lot of challenges that are associated with that. Not just the travel time that's associated with it, but also the changes in your diet, being able to get appropriately inoculated for certain situations that will occur. Yeah. Did you have any inoculations before you went over there?
Nope. Officially, there aren't any special inoculations required for travel to India.
Okay.
So I did not.
Okay. And then did you need to prepare yourself ahead of time? The reason I'm asking this is because I've been informed that typically when you go to India, or when you're ready to go to India, you want to give yourself about a week ahead of time to kind of acclimate your digestive tract to a different type of palate. Something that's more geared towards veggie and soups and things like that, and certain spices that maybe you're not accustomed to over here in the States, as well as potentially some different preparations of cooking styles as well.
Well, yeah, in general, just from a safety perspective, I typically only eat in hotels and Western style restaurants.
Yeah.
Now this time I did have a bit of a food adventure in that I've been to 19 countries in 2.5 years. I've never once gotten sick from food outside of the country until this particular trip, which was a bit of an adventure. Now, normally I avoid eating any like street food or anything. I tend to be pretty unadventurous just because I travel for such short periods of time. The last thing I want to do is feel sick or uncomfortable. So I typically don't eat local food, except for like if it's at like a higher end restaurant or a hotel. Otherwise, I tend to find stuff that's prepackaged. Mm-hmm. I broke that rule on this trip right after I took this selfie, actually. At the Red Fort, I had not eaten that day and I was really, really hungry. So I went, there was actually a street carnival happening right in front of the fort. and I was like starving hungry. And so I was thinking to myself, well, there is a lot of prepackaged food here, but it's mostly like junk food, like chips. But there's a paneer stand right there. I'm sure I could just get some grilled paneers, like cheese. They make these, like it's paneer, it's like cheese, and then they make it in a little bread wrap. And I was thinking, oh, how dangerous could that be? So I had that and started to feel ill like the next day. And when I came home, I was actually out of commission for a week, like high fever, cramps, in severe pain. I finally went to the doctor and I had 4 different types of foodborne illness. So I
Wow.
had rotavirus, norovirus, 2 forms of E. coli. It was a real
Oh, my God.
mess. So lesson learned for me, I'm going to stick to my strategy of higher end restaurants and prepackaged food going forward. That's kind of my rule.
There are 2 things I want to bring up, and thank you for sharing that with us. There's 2 things I want to bring up as far as this goes. The situation that is often referred to as deli belly, because there might be a lot of undercooked food, and like you said, there's a lot of food preparation challenges that are associated with going to some place like that. So sticking with higher end restaurants oftentimes will help with that process. But I mean, again, you're going to get people who will love to share their food with you. It's just kind of an inviting culture. So they want to be able to do stuff like that. But you really do have to be very careful. I mean, like for myself, I have a very sensitive stomach. And so for me, I want to be extremely cautious. The other side of this as well is about water. And I want to encourage people to be very cautious about the water. When you're drinking water, you only use bottled water, and specifically water that you know has not been, where the cap has not been open. Make sure it's been sealed. Look for plastic sealing. Look to make sure it's not even loose a little bit, because sometimes, to save money, they'll fill it up with a hose, and again, that can cause similar situations. Likewise, also for us here in America, we're used to having drinks that have ice in them. Don't get ice in your drinks because of that exact situation. You don't know where the water from that ice is being generated from. So as part of this thing, just on a cautionary level, please be careful about those specific factors when you're considering what options you have to eat.
Yeah. And you'll almost always have like plenty of bottled water in your hotel room. So just grab a couple of bottles and take it with you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you'll probably need it a lot because it's very warm out there and the humidity is
Well,
extremely high.
yes. That's the other thing to think about, though, especially a country as big as India, is the differences in weather from place to place.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, Delhi was chilly when I was there in November. So I actually needed a sweater. It was not, I'd not had that experience in India before, but it was actually chilly out. Like I underdressed.
Well, let's talk about that in the pre-packing stage. Like what kind of weather were you expecting? Were you expecting it to be like incredibly hot and humid?
I was expecting it to be like the last time. Well, the last time was in Delhi was in like earlier in the fall of the year, so it was warmer out. So so last time I went to India, I wore like shorts and a t-shirt, and actually felt, well, temperature wise, I was very comfortable. I definitely stood out more because there are very few locals who wear shorts. Just from a modesty and dress perspective, I really stood out because I was wearing shorts. So on this trip, I only wore jeans, but I hadn't thought about needing them for warmth. Just to be honest, I hadn't even checked the weather before I went because I remembered the weather from last time I was there.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have paid more attention to that and maybe taken a jacket with me, because it was definitely chilly in the morning and the evenings. But in terms of packing, for this trip, I was only gone for 4 days total. So I wanted to be able to carry everything with me. So I just took one large backpack that I could carry with me at all times and brought like 3 or 4 outfits. Yeah.
So let me ask you then a couple of the pre-packing things.
Sure.
Um, Mosquito repellent and sun protection, whether that's a hat or whether that's sunblock. Did you bring those with you, or did you
Yeah.
purchase them?
Yep. So mosquito protection, I was not worried about too much in the city because I was just going to be in the city of Delhi.
Okay.
Um, but for sun protection, I brought my own with me because I did want to. I've been working on keeping my skin more pristine, I guess.
That's okay. Totally understand. And then two other things. Travel medications like stuff for migraines, stuff for pain, stuff for stuff like, do you ever pack stuff like that at all?
You know, I don't typically, but that's not stuff. I'm not someone who tends to be prone to headaches and aches and pains. So I guess it's not really been part of my planning in the past.
Okay. I was just kind of wondering if you packed stomach medications as well as part of that
No,
process.
I probably should have taken some Imodium with me. I guess I learned that for future reference.
And then the other part of that as well is toiletries. I know that when I went to Thailand a couple of years ago, some of the places that I went to didn't have toilet paper, and you actually had to purchase toilet paper as part of that process. Did you have anything like that at all, where you had to do something like that, or were most of the places higher end where they actually had that?
Well, no, in India, I would, I'm, there's kind of two, it's very, um, kind of bifurcated. So there are literal public toilets which are located throughout the city, um, which I am not comfortable using just as a Westerner. Like those are literally because people don't have plumbing in their homes that they use that public toilet. So I typically would use the restroom in like a hotel or a restaurant or shopping mall, which then has like a full Western style bathroom, just like you would expect in the West. But that is something to consider, and frankly, something to be prepared for is very common to be walking down the sidewalk and there will be people just peeing up against a wall. So it's definitely a little bit of an adjustment. You have to watch where you step sometimes. Um, so I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
Okay. So, and then, so then moving forward from the pre-packing process to your actual parking situation and transport to and from the airport. Now you
Yep,
were looking out a SeaTac, is that correct?
correct. Yes.
Okay. And was it nonstop to London and then you had the time there and then after that you went directly to India?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So on the way there, yeah, I did. I was only in London for a couple hours, and yeah,
Okay. And did you just have your husband drop you off, or was it more of
just
a
took an Uber.
took an Uber? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bug my husband either. It's kind of one of those things. And then I guess talk to me about about the plane you were on
Yep.
and first class on British Airways.
Yep. So both of these flights, it was a Boeing 777, which is sort of standard, kind of global standard long haul type plane. It's one of a couple of aircraft that British Airways flies into Seattle. But yeah, so the interesting thing, I'll certainly try not to get too far into it because I could talk about this for hours. But British Airways is not known for the quality of their hard product, meaning their aircraft tend to be a little bit old, a little dingy, a little outdated compared to some other airlines. Which is one of the reasons I was excited to try first class, because at least that would be a little bit of a step up there. And their service can be spotty. They have actually two sets of cabin crew. So they have what they call global crew, which is sort of the people that were hired under their old labor contract. And these are the folks who, have been flying for 30 years. And that could mean you get people who are super experienced and know what they're doing, or it could mean you get people who are really kind of bitter and kind of jaded in their job. So, and then the other set of crew is people who have been hired under a new, much lower paying contract. And this is called their mixed crew. And you'll be able to recognize it right away, because these folks will all be in their 20s and frankly making near poverty wages living in London. And those folks tend to be inexperienced, but very earnest and excited about being able to be a flight attendant. So it's a very interesting experience. I've flown with both types of crews and had lots of interesting experiences. On this particular trip, I had mixed crew for all 4 segments, but the service was excellent. I think that the coolest thing for me on this particular flight is that they use real high-end bone china and real crystal glassware, which is funny. Like, you can tell because it has tiny chips and imperfections that you wouldn't see in normal glassware. But that was really cool. I can't remember the last time I drank out of real crystal glassware. So that was pretty cool. And the service was very attentive, very helpful, lots of great alcohol and food. So that was awesome.
I'm assuming you flew into Heathrow. Is that correct?
Yep, through Heathrow, yep.
Perfect. You're only there for a little while, and then you fly into Delhi.
Yeah.
Which, talk to me a little bit about that airport.
Yeah. So Delhi is definitely the best airport in India in terms of my experience, and I think that's kind of the consensus with people who fly a lot. So it's pretty easy to get through. The one thing to keep in mind, one thing to know if you are flying into Delhi is, okay, you'll come down through immigration. There's all the e-visa counters are on your right, but there are a bunch of different lines. So walk all the way to the end, because there's no like rhyme or reason to the lines. If you go to the very end, like that queue is going to be a lot shorter than the queue right when you walk out the door. So I learned that lesson because I've gone through the e-visa line in Delhi 2 different times.
So even though you had the physical paper,
yes,
did you had to go through the e-visa line as opposed to a different?
There's like a regular visa line, and then the longest line is for Indian citizens anywhere. Okay. So that's either coming or going. The Indian citizen line is always crazy, like crazy and long. But yeah, and they want to see. I mean, part of the process is just you just know what they want and just give it to them. So just walk up to the desk, have your e-visa printed out. They want to see your inbound boarding pass and the photo page of your passport, and just have it there, give it to them, and make it easy for everybody.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So it sounds like based on this flight, you didn't have any pre-planned destinations because you had such a short time in London. Talk to me a little bit about your accommodations over there now, were you saying in Delhi or New Delhi?
Well, they're kind of used interchangeably. Like New Delhi generally refers to the very specific part of the city where all the government buildings are. Mm-hmm. So I actually stayed near the airport. Okay. I used some reward points I have with Hyatt to stay at the Andaz, which is very cool, trendy, upscale hotel brand. So it was really nice. They had an amazing breakfast buffet, probably one of the best breakfast buffets I've ever seen in my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was, that was cool. One of the things I did do is, they do have Uber in India. I've always had mixed results with whether it was like good and reliable. So on this particular occasion, I was able to book round trip transport through the hotel, which is something like a lot of people don't do because it is expensive. Like I paid $100 round trip, which if I had Ubered, that would have been like $5 each way. But it's very reliable. There's somebody waiting with your name. There's a car waiting for you. You don't have to worry about it. And that's kind of ultimately worth it, I think.
I like to do that when I'm traveling overseas for any reason, just because it's really nice when you get out of passport control to have someone there with a card with your name on it saying, hey, come on over. I'll escort you. We'll get you right from here to the hotel. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And that makes me feel a lot better, as opposed to, say, for example, going to India and having like 50 taxi drivers try and scout me for a variety of different prices. And it's like, I don't want to play that game. I mean, that's why I think that having this ahead of time, yeah, it's a little expensive, but you know what, honestly, if you're going to be vacationing and you want to be pampered anyways, why not?
Yeah.
Why not be that one that has the air conditioned coach and, you know, take you, let them do that for you.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Okay. So let's talk about, your itinerary. And this is where I'm going to let you kind of take over a little bit. You're going to only be there for about 3 days.
Yeah.
Talk to me about maybe the individual locations you went to, and maybe just like one excursion that you went to each of them.
Yeah, I essentially just Googled places to go, like what should I see in Delhi, which and then I just kind of worked my way through the list. So the first thing, it's actually the most visited site in India, is the Lotus Temple, which is it's the Baha'i temple for the Baha'i faith. And it's actually a relatively new building. So I just took an Uber there, got there actually right when it opened in the morning. But it is an amazing, it's modern, it's only a few years old, but it's just amazing like worship and reflection space that is designed to look like a big lotus flower. It is absolutely beautiful. And so you can actually, and it has these gorgeous manicured grounds. And you walk in, you take your shoes off. There's like a little shoe taking off stand before you go in. And then they do groups where you can walk through the temple, but you have to remain silent when you're in the temple. I was fortunate enough that the group I was with happened to be there. They have, I think, like every 1 or every 2 hours, an actual like prayer ceremony. So I was there for that, which was pretty cool. I would recommend that. Like they just kind of read or sang things from a bunch of like different scriptures from different religions. It was very cool. I'm really glad I did that.
Did you have an opportunity to take any pictures while you were in the Lotus Temple?
They do not allow, good question. They do not allow any photos inside the temple.
Okay.
Yep. So there are no, you can take pictures outside, but you're not allowed to take any photos inside the temple.
Perfect. Not a problem.
Was
that located actually in Delhi specifically?
Yep. Yeah, it's sort of in, it's almost in kind of what's considered the New Delhi area.
Okay.
Yeah, everything I went to was like right in sort of the old main tourist part of the city.
Well, you went to the Red Fort, which I thought was either in Agra or Jaipur. Is that
Nope, the Red Fort's in Delhi. It's the Delhi Red Fort.
Okay.
So, yep, it's like in the heart of old Delhi is the Red Fort. So that's the next place I went, which was really, really, really cool. I like from the outside, it's just looks like a big red wall. But once you go inside, it's incredible. It's basically like a whole city inside of this fort with multiple palaces, and like there's like a music hall, and like in multiple mosques, and a bathing house, and then there's like 2 different museums. I mean, it's just a huge complex with lots of amazing buildings with really cool architecture. So strongly, yeah, that was like one of the coolest things I did. I really enjoyed that. Had a lot of good photo ops there.
Very cool. And then what was your next excursion?
Yep. Yep. And then the next stop I went to was to the main mosque, which is like just a few blocks away, and that was really interesting because it like you can see it from everywhere, but it's actually like you kind of have to negotiate your way through a lot of crowded alleyways and marketplaces to actually get to the steps of the mosque. And you yes, it's like lots of steps because it's like at the very top of the hill, and that was really cool. Yeah, a really cool view of the whole city from the front of the mosque, and then inside it was just enormous. They're actually having it was actually during prayer time, so you weren't allowed actually into the inside of the mosque. You had to stay out in the courtyard if you were Muslim. So I just stayed out in the outside of the courtyard, and it was that was really interesting.
Nice. All right. And then where else after that?
Yeah, and then the final place I ended up going for when I was there. There was actually, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of political turmoil in India recently. So there was actually a giant political rally happening. And so it actually wasn't possible to get an Uber anywhere. So I decided to walk about 45 minutes to my next destination, which was Gandhi's memorial. So the memorial's there. It's actually like the spot where they're cremated kind of has this sort of marble altar. And so I went there, which was quite moving.
And just to confirm, we're talking about Mahatma Gandhi.
Mahatma, sorry, yes.
Not
Indira Gandhi, all of the other Gandhis, and like Nehru and like the other sort of founding families of India, they actually all have similar memorials along the same street. But yeah, Mahatma Gandhi's is the biggest one at the end. Okay. And yeah, so it's really just like this like the place where he was cremated, and then it's like surrounded by this artificial hill where you can kind of walk along the top and get a really interesting view. That was quite moving. And then those were the highlights.
On a note, and this is to my students, on a note of political unrest, because this will sometimes happen in different destinations that you go to. I went to Barcelona a couple of years ago. And for those who are not familiar, Barcelona, the city of Barcelona, is actually looking to potentially, and specifically the entire region where Barcelona is located at, is looking to, which is called Catalonia, they're looking to secede from the country of Spain and become their own country. And when the day we arrived in Barcelona,
Mm-hmm.
all the politicians, all the Catalonian politicians had been arrested by the Spanish police.
Ooh.
And so it wasn't a violent protest, but there were a lot of protests going on in the street. There were people banging on pots and pans, letting their voices be heard. But like you, we were really having delays in our transportation as part of that process.
Yeah.
So in reference to understanding that, I know there are a couple of great government websites you can go to that give you insight. There's the World Fact Book. I know that's one that I often look at. I think that was through the
CIA.
CIA, yeah. And so, but anyone can access that, and it gives you a little bit of information about warnings, certain places that you should be a little bit more aware of, and they'll raise the alert levels on things like that. So you can be informed well in advance before going on a trip like this, or even really quickly if there's an issue. Do you use anything like that at all?
No, I probably should. If I think about it, like in the last month I've been to India during their political unrest. I stayed at a hotel that had been bombed in Sri Lanka and went to Hong Kong during their protests. So I guess I just kind of keep walking and don't worry about it too much, but I thought that might not be within everyone's comfort zone.
Yeah, honestly, you really do have to kind of figure out what your comfort level is. On
Yeah.
that exact same trip that we were in Barcelona, we had gone to London, and this was in 2016. And at the exact same time when we were in London, there was what they refer to as a terrorist attack in the tube, where I guess some local guy had just let off a pipe bomb in the tube. And so we were getting telephone call or text from our relatives saying, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And we're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah, we don't even know what's going on. So I mean, like later on that evening, we go up to get a taxi, and we're like, did you hear about the terrorist attack in the subway? And the guy was like, "Yeah, it's just some crazy guy who did that." All it's really going to do is increase traffic, because a lot of locations are so used to like small amounts of terrorist activity that will happen from time to time. So again, it's a matter of comfort level, what you feel is appropriate for your risk level.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So, all right, let's talk about the return trip. How was your return trip back to the States?
It was great. So I came back, and this time I had about 12 hours in London. So I decided to get out into the city a little bit. And so I one of the good new things. I certainly have strong feelings about Brexit conceptually, but one of the things that the UK has done is they have added several countries, including the United States, to the list of people who can use their electronic passport control. So, normally the UK border historically has been a nightmare. Just it's very long queues. It's always been a very lengthy passport control line and process. I was able to, now you're able to use the e-gates. So I was through passport control in 15 seconds. There were no lines at the e-gates. And I literally made it like from coming out of the train from my gate to being through passport control and customs in 45 seconds.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
So, which for people who have traveled to the UK in the past know, like the UK border has historically been really, I mean, I can't complain too much because I know it's probably about the same as for non-US citizens. Like the queues look comparable to the non-US citizen queues that I've seen coming back to the US. So that was cool. And then in London, they have something called the Heathrow Express, which is great. It's a train line that's it's separate from the tube because it actually only stops at the airport and then at Paddington Station. It's a little spendy. I think it's like $35.
Yeah.
But it's still less than like taking a cab, and it's so fast.
Do you keep your Oyster card, which is
actually
transit card?
Don't. So you, I actually just use my watch because you can use any Apple Pay card.
Okay.
On the tube. So you do need to buy a specific ticket for the Heathrow Express because it's its own thing that's owned by the Heathrow Airport Management Company.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I got off at Paddington Station and then went down. I just decided to do some touristy stuff. So yeah, but I used my watch, my Apple Watch to get on and off the tube.
Okay.
Yep. Went down did some tourist photos, then came back. And the one really cool thing about flying first class through Heathrow is they have a special lounge called the Concord Room, which has like sit down restaurant. It's amazing. So, and I went back and did that and then rested up before my trip back.
Perfect. And then finally, how was the trip back, and how was passport control back when you went to SeaTac?
Actually, this is the first time I've ever, so I have global entry, so normally it's a very easy process. Yeah. However, I forgot to mention, I decided to buy some Cuban cigars while I was in Heathrow, and which I've brought back Cuban cigars before. They're legal to bring back, although there's some ambiguity about what the exact rule is around
numbers of them.
Quantity, which actually even the CBP people at SeaTac asked me, because I'm a serious rule follower, so I clicked yes on food because I brought chocolate back with me, and then they asked if I had anything else to declare. I said, well, I'm bringing cigars, and he's like, oh, not Cuban cigars. I'm like, yes. He like literally, which is something a CBP officer has never said. He's like, are you joking? Like, no. So I went through secondary. I was like the first person off the plane, first person through. Like, I was literally the first person at the exit. So it took like 5 minutes. They just looked through my bags, which is the first time I've ever had a secondary inspection. But
That's still not that bad, though.
yeah.
Global entry, I think, is one of those things where it's worth its weight in gold just because of all the stuff that you do.
Yep.
I think it's fantastic. Okay, so some takeaways from this vacation. Talk to me about the pros of going to a place like India.
Yeah. Pros are it's always cheap to travel to and cheap to stay in. So you get a lot for your money. You can see a lot of stuff in like a very short period of time.
Excellent. And then some things that maybe a first-time traveler to India should be aware of.
Yeah, well, I learned, shouldn't have been a new lesson, but I learned not to eat street food.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is like just to be aware of, especially if you're traveling to India for the first time, there's going to be aggressive people trying to sell you cabs. There's going to be aggressive people. Like there was a guy on a pedicab, I kid you not, that followed me along for an hour as I walked through the city trying to offer me a pedicab. And I just kept saying no and kept saying no. You have to be firm. And for me, it's, I understand that people are trying to make a living, but there are situations in which, they'll be offering you, oh, I'm going to take you to the spice market, or I'm going to take you to my friend's shop. And it's not rare that there's a situation in which you're taken somewhere, it isn't the real spice market. Your best case scenario is you're going to be overpaying. Worst case scenario is, you can be accused of stealing and there are police officers in on it. Like those kinds of things do happen. So I try to avoid buying any kind of services or, rides, cars, tours from people on the street. So it is something to be really cautious about, and just don't be afraid to say no firmly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then finally, any value adds, cost savings, best practices that you'd like to share with people? I mean, obviously you're the member of Alaska Airlines and you use their travel program.
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually do strongly recommend if you're in a city, especially on the West Coast, Alaska Airlines program is probably the best for people on the West Coast because you can still earn miles based on actual miles flown. Most airlines have converted to a dollar value. Like you have to spend a certain amount of money as opposed to being able to earn by actually literally traveling. So
yeah, awesome. And I mean, I would recommend travel programs for pretty much any of you students that are out there, whether it's through hotels, whether it's through rental car agencies, whether it's through cruise lines, whether it's through airlines. There's so many different programs for travel out there that you can earn additional loyalty rewards on. I guess there's two different schools of thought. Either A, you want to test out the waters and kind of try on different things once in a while, or alternatively, you can always, if you like a specific vendor that's out there, stick with that vendor because they will most likely have great opportunities for you to earn free perks, maybe even free trips in some cases.
All right, well, I need to bid farewell.
Yep. And I want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Again, for my students that are out there, I just want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate your time. Chad, thank you so much for yours as well. And for everybody that's out there, please make every day a travel adventure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.